And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. And we are sitting about 3.5 hours away from the team announcement for this weekend. It should be very interesting. Springbok team announcement on the back of a disappointing game. Some people saying a disappointing result. Look at this end of the day result to win. Yes, it might not have been a bonus point win, for example. Not that points really mattered in the end when it came to the rugby championship table. You know, the win was always going to solidify second place, and we couldn't win. So yeah, I mean, I suppose it was more about the performance, wasn't it? About the sort of scoreline and the manner in which we played this weekend, which was disappointing on pretty much all those fronts. In fact, the result probably the only thing that we really sort of mattered and could be happy about. Although I do think that I saw a lot of good from a defensive point of view. I think we've defended far too much and more than we'd like to, maybe, and I would like to have a bit more possession. But generally, I do think we defended pretty well, and I think our defensive system looked pretty good this weekend. So yeah, but it wasn't an ideal game. We know this, and what's interesting, obviously, is the fact that it's going to be a completely different team this weekend. In fact, probably only maybe 4 or 5 players in the 23 will actually be the same. The likes of maybe I think Jesse Creel plays again. I think Lakanya will get some more game time. I think Marvin Ori might get some more game time. But generally, we've taken a completely different sort of squad to what we saw last weekend, and it's going to be a lost opportunity for some players. I personally think there's probably about 95% of the squad picked, to be honest, already. I do think that, you know, for example, I think the players that have stayed behind, I think are pretty much going to the World Cup. Maybe a question mark around Marco Verstappen, whether he'll make the final squad or whether they will go with sort of Siaklis and have Marco Verstappen in standby. Siaklis was back to running a couple of drills with him in the warm-up actually on Saturday, which is good to see this past weekend. So yeah, it's a completely different squad, and it'll be interesting to see who the 3 players who won't play this weekend will be, because it is a 26-man squad, which means that only 3 players that have travelled will actually not feature. One of them will be a scrum half, one of them will be a prop, and then it'll be interesting to see if one of them will be either a loose forward or one of the locks won't play. So I mean every single backline player who is gone will feature, I reckon. I'll be very surprised if they don't, unless they go with a sort of a 6-2 split. But you know, we've only taken 1 flower half, we've taken 3 centers, we've taken 3 wings, we've taken 1 full back. So so if we go with a 6-2 split, then it'll be a scrum half and a backline player who sits out, and then there'll only be 1 forward that doesn't play, which will then be one of the props, you'd imagine. So yes, it'll be interesting to see exactly what sort of team is named later, and I suppose it's now kind of a situation where they keep saying they want to give everybody a chance, but there must be certain players who are just not going to go to the World Cup and are probably not even going to be potentially first reserve in case of an injury. In which case, is there a point in playing them? And I'm looking at players like a Jean-Luc Dupré or a Dion Fourie who have not featured at all this season, as well as a Gerard Steenekamp, although I do think that Steenekamp does play, because I think we need to give Steven Kitsoff a rest. I think we know our props. I think we know exactly who's going. We know who we want to go. And we need to put game time into the likes of a Trevor Nyakane, Thomas Toy, Vincent Cochran, maybe to a certain degree. We don't need to put time into Steven Kitsoff. We don't need to put time into Franz Maherd, which is why he stayed behind. But we're going to talk about what sort of selections we expect to see. And again, we will be live for that announcement later. So this is the first of 2 live streams today. So hopefully you guys will come and always join us later. So before I go on to sort of there, let's go to some of the comments. So Spirit saying, which Springbok games are you going to in the World Cup, and when do you leave for France? I am leaving on the 14th of September, on Thursday night it is, and we are flying into Paris, obviously. We are then going straight to Bordeaux. Our first game of the World Cup, our first Springbok game as well, is actually against Romania, which is on Sunday the 17th of September in Bordeaux. We are also going to the South Africa versus Tonga match, which I think is on the 1st of October, or around then, I think it is. And those are the 2 Springbok games at this stage. We are waiting to see if we might be able to go to another one as well. So at least a minimum of 2 games. We are going to go to 4 other different games at this stage. We're watching New Zealand, Italy, Uruguay, Namibia, Wales, and Australia as well, which is going to be very, very cool. But hopefully we'll have confirmation on exactly what our sort of tour itinerary will be in the next week or two. How's that? We hope you're well. But let's talk about the team that we're sort of expecting to see. Now, as I said, I don't think Steven Kitsar should be playing. I think they've taken him purely as cover because they've got nobody else. So for me, I think we should be seeing Gerard Stennekamp, Tervin Nikani, Thomas Toys, and Vincent Koch as our props. I personally would like to see Trevor start at tight head, maybe with a Thomas Toy and a Joseph Dweber in the starting front row, and then you bring off Gerard Stennekamp, a Vincent Koch, and a Bongi Benambi in the second half. And again, bar injury, I don't want to see Steven Kitsar on a rugby field this weekend. In terms of the hookers, both Bongi Benambi and Joseph Dweber will play. Those are the only two hookers. We took 3 out-and-out locks in Loic Diago, Jean Clay, and Marvin Norrie. We've then got 3 loose forwards in Jean-Luc Dupré, Evan Lewis, Jasper Wiese, and utility forwards in Dion Fourie and Franco Mostert. So if we then go and say, right, so Jean Clay probably the only out-and-out number 4 these days, so he probably starts. And I think I'd be very interested to see if he starts with Marvin Norrie, if he starts with Loic Diago. I do think those would be the sort of the options. Then if you look at the loose trio, I think Dion Fourie potentially does start, although I do like him off the bench. But I think if you're looking for a fetcher and an out number 6, you probably are going to go with Dion Fourie. I think Jasper Wiese starts at 8. I think Evan Lewis comes off the bench. So I think you're probably looking at Dion Fourie, Jasper Wiese, and then one of Jean-Luc Dupré or Franco Mostert. I think that'll be kind of the big decision we will see. Look, we could go with a completely different loose trio. You could look Jean-Luc Dupré on the at lock, for example. If he is an option lock, but he's been listed as a loose forward, so I'd be very surprised if he starts at lock. But for example, you could go Jean-Luc Dupré in a 6-2 split. You could start Franco Mostert next to Dion Fourie and Jasper Wiese, and you could have Evan Lewis, Jean-Luc Dupré, and Loic Diago coming off the bench. So you could use all those locks and loose forwards, utility forwards in a 6-2 split. That is definitely an option. Scrum halves have taken 3. We can only see 2, and I'd like to see him beat Jaden Hendrickson, Hirsch, and Kobus Reinach. I don't think Hirsch Yankees is in the World Cup mix, so I don't really see the point of giving him game time. I'd like to see us start Jaden Hendrickson, and I'd like us to bring Kobus Reinach off the bench. I do think Kobus Reinach has probably benefited from that Grant Williams injury, so I think he might have been on the chopping block next to Jaden in terms of who's taking. If they are we're gonna roll the dice with Grant Williams, but yeah, I think that injury for Grant Williams, I don't think they're taking to the World Cup. He won't be able to play again for another 2 weeks, which means if you are going to give him more game time, it's kind of come against the All Blacks and the Wales, and I'm not sure they'll be prepared to do that. They might be, but I'm not sure. And then obviously Marnie Lieberg will start at fly half, and our centers will probably be Andre Estes and Jesse Creel, and I think Lekanya Am will come off the bench again. I personally think we're going to go with a 5-3 split. I think we're going to have Kirkley Aronson, Mapimpi, and Willemse as our starting back 3. We could start Caden Moody and bring Kirkley Aronson off the bench. He covers 15, 11, and 14, so he's a nice bench player to have. So you could have a bench of a Lekanya Kobus Reinach, Lekanya and Caden Moody, or a Kobus Reinach, Lekanya and Kirkley Aronson, for example. I think both benches are quite good. I think Daniel Williams does need to start and get some time in at 15. So yeah, as I said, there are different ways they can tweak this team. So it's not necessarily as clear cut. It's all going to come down to that 6-2 or 5-3 split. If it's a 5-3 split, for example, then all of a sudden we're not going to be using one of the loose forwards or utility forwards, I don't think, or maybe one of the locks. And then obviously we know a prop won't play. And a scrum off won't play. So we know that one scrum off won't play, and we know that one prop won't play. So the big sort of question is, where is that extra sort of player who would not play? Will it not be a backline player, or will it not be a forward? So there's not a lot of different options we can do, but we can sort of tweak the team accordingly. So I'm very keen to see the type of team we go with. And again, I mean, I would be looking and saying, well, is Caden Moody, for example, going to go to the World Cup? Potentially not. Maybe it's a good idea not to play him. Is Jean-Luc Dupré going to go to the World Cup? Potentially not. So maybe it's not a good idea to play him either. Gerard Stennekamp not going to go to the World Cup, so maybe you don't play him. And then you've got a 5-3 split. The Lekanya or you can have a 6-2, for example, with Lekanya a Kobus on the bench, for example, and you leave out Caden Moody. And you start Andre Estes and Jesse Creel, which I think what they will want to do, because I think that'll be our centre combination for a Romania game and potentially a Tonga game. And I think they need to play against each other. I think obviously David Lendi, Lekanya remains our top centre pairing. So let's give our centre pairing minutes together. Franco Mostert, for example, needs minutes. I think he should be starting. I don't think he's as effective off the bench. So I think that start him at number 7, for example. I think have Dion Free next to him. And a Jasper Wiese maybe. Also, you got to look at, for example, the line-out options. So for me, that's why Franco Mostert has to start. Jean-Luc Dupre is a line-out option, but I think Franco Mostert's a much better line-out option. I think, next to Jasper Wiese, who doesn't jump, and Dion Free, for example, who doesn't jump, obviously, you will need that extra line option. And I think that Franco Mostert with a Loic de Jager and a Jean Klein, for example, are all good line options. Marvin Uri coming off the bench is another good line option. So I think that's kind of what we will go with, or maybe what we should go with. Alex says, will you just be analysing, commentating the South African games or the World Cup in general? We will be covering every single match live. Every single match will be live, or will be covered live on the channel. We will be looking at all the teams. We will be doing breakdowns. We'll be doing 5 things learned. We'll be doing a lot of different general content on more than just the Springboks. Obviously, they will be our main focus, but we will be covering all the teams. All the press conferences from all the teams will be going up. We'll be covering every single game. So there will be a preview, a review, and a watch along of all 48 matches. So this is going to be a one-stop shop for the World Cup. It's going to have player interviews. We're going to have press conferences, all the various coverage. We'll have team of the weeks. We'll have combined teams, for example. When it comes to the quarters, semis, finals, third and fourth playoff, it's every single basically match. We'll hopefully have a halftime, pre-time show, for example. We're going to be having fan cams from different fan bases. We're going to hopefully have New Zealanders in the fan cams. We're going to have English fans. We will have Irish fans. We'll have Welsh fans. We want to try and really start making this quite an international channel. Again, once we will obviously have a big focus on the Springboks, but it's not going to start and stop there. Joshua said, I think Loic starts, needs game time, and Double says Trev needs to start, especially with Ox injury still in limbo. So MC says 5-3 split from now on, please, and saying Grant Williams will be our main man after the next World Cup going forward. He could very well be, and there's a lot of exciting scrum-offs, and I think they're obviously moving forward. Jaden Henderson, Grant Williams will probably be, and Hersh Yankees, if he can continue playing, will probably be our dominant scrum-offs. I think that somebody like a Morley van den Berg, for example, Ambrose Pierce playing pretty good rugby. I think there's a couple of nice, exciting 9s coming through around the block. You look at, for example, Imad Khan, he's been playing for the under-20s. I think in sort of 5-6 years' time, I think he'll be in the mix. I think Nico Steyn, the 21-year-old at the Lions, is very talented. So Hammer's playing some fantastic rugby. I'd be surprised if he ever does play international rugby, but he is playing some tremendous rugby for the Lions at the moment. Josh saying he's bottom with the 9s. Don't think Herschel will play. Feel bad for Grant, but he's the future. Where would you rate all of the locks? So I think the interesting thing is what do we rate as our locks, and who do we rate as our locks? For example, Franco Mostert has kind of become this utility forward, and I kind of almost sort of feel he's kind of been lost a little bit in the system because of it. I think Franco Mostert is been one of our best players post-COVID, and I think that he did a fantastic job at 7 with the injury to Peter Steph, the toy. And there was a very interesting thread by Angus Gardner, who's actually somebody I went to varsity with, and he's quite big on Twitter. Analyst Gus is what he goes with. And he did a whole sort of thread on the number 7 options. And they're saying that we've generally played Kwagga Smith at number 7 a lot. When Dwayne Vermeulen has been back. When Dwayne Vermeulen hasn't played, we've played Franco Mostert. And a lot of that comes down to the line options and I suppose sort of the dues that everybody performs. So, Evan Etzebeth, Archie Snyman, Loic de Jager are probably our top 3 locks at the moment, because I think Franco Mostert suddenly not become a lock. But the old 6-2 split was the 2 locks and 1 loose forward. And I don't see why we can't go back to that, to be honest. We generally haven't, but I don't see why we can't, because Franco Mostert is a utility player. And you've got a PSF Toy, for example, who could play lock if need be. But so, for example, if you're starting a Evan Etzebeth, Loic de Jager, bringing on Franco Mostert, Archie Snyman, you're starting a Peter Steph, the Toy, Dwayne Vermeulen, and Siya Kolisi, then you've got to bring on, you only got 1 loose forward on the bench. How do you get that right? Because Jasper Wiese, for example, is probably something you should be in the 23, but we had that Francois Low impact in the last World Cup, which we wouldn't have if we went with the Jasper Wiese, Archie Snyman, Franco Mostert bench. If you throw Kwagga Smith into the mix, we would have that. I personally think that Kwagga has actually made himself pretty indispensable to that 23 because of his fetching prowess. Some people saying it's between Marco Verstappen and Kwagga Smith. I don't think Kwagga Smith has got anything to do with Marco Verstappen. I think it's from Marco Verstappen or Siya Kolisi. I think if Kolisi doesn't play, and and he's not fit for the World Cup, then I think Markham and Staden will come in his place, and I think Kwagga Smith comes off the bench. But I think if Khaleesi is fitting in the squad, then I think Kwagga comes off the bench. He can come on at 7 or 6 or 8. Actually, he covers all 3 positions. So I do think that he's played himself into that 23. Archie Snyman is in that 23. Do you go with a Dwayne Vermeulen and a Jas Pavisa? 2 out and out 8s. We've not often done that in the 6-2 split. We've had that Pavisa coming off the bench, but utility and versatility has been the name of the game for this block management. And that's what they had in the last World Cup. You had Archie Snyman coming on. Not that Franco Moss had really played flank, but you had a PCF Latour. You could play at lock if you needed to. You had Franco Moss. You could probably play at flank if you needed to. But then you had Francois Lowe coming on. You could cover different sides of the scrum and stuff. And we had options. So to bring on an out-and-out number 8 off the bench means you've got to have utility somewhere. Who can play on the flank if needs be? Who can chip to lock if needs be? So it's probably about that balance, isn't it? Assuming we go with the 6-2 split, we might have to start moving back to the 5-3 split. I don't think we will, to be honest. I think that we've got Damian Willemse, who covers every position in the backline, basically. And I think as a result, I think we're very happy to go with our 6-2 split because we are a forwards-dominated team, and it's worked for us. Even when things have been going badly, the good games we've had, the forwards have really dominated. You look at the Australia game a month ago, and the forwards dominated. They absolutely dominated the Australians. And that was a big part. Obviously, the backline had some really nice moments. Andre Estehad had a great game. Kurt Lawrence scored a hat-trick. But the platform was laid down by the forwards. And that's what we need to focus on. We've got some fantastic backline players, but if you don't dominate up front, there's no point having them. The best teams in the world have got the best packs. New Zealand, personally, I genuinely think the difference between New Zealand a year ago and New Zealand now is their pack. Their front row is really stood up. Ethan de Groot's coming leaps and bounds. And Scott Barrett is probably one of the most informed players in the world right now. Not even the most informed locks, he's the best lock in the world right now. On current form, literally on current form, I don't think, obviously the Six Nations was a while ago, but I think if you look at the Six Nations, I thought James Ryan was playing pretty good rugby. The French guy, I'm going to completely lose my name, but he's been fantastic since he started playing his rugby. There's no Paul Willemse, but he was in good nick. There are some great locks out there, but Scott Barrett is playing tremendous rugby at the moment. And I think that you then got an Artie Severe, for example, who we know what Artie Severe does. And Shannon Frizzell has been in the form of his life for the last few games. So for me, that pack has been the difference for New Zealand, is that they haven't been dominated up front. And as a result, the backline can switch to do what they do. Ireland's got a fantastic pack. France, they've got a giant pack. So we all know that, your backline players score all the tries. We also all know that they only play well when you're going forward. Your forwards get you forward. You've got to have a very good pack, and you've got to have a very good kicking game. And you can jump in the comments and say, no, we don't need to kick. The best teams in the world kick the most. New Zealand kicked more on Saturday than we did on Saturday. Fun fact. France kicked the ball more than anybody else in the world. Ireland are I think, second in terms of how they kick. Obviously, there's different ways to deploy a kicking game. There's the up and under and how you use it to progress. There's kicking deep to try and force territory. So there's different ways to operate a kicking game. But for me, your ingredients of winning matches and winning tournaments is you've got to have a pack that dominates. You've got to have a very good set piece. You've got to have a great kicking game. After that, you then obviously the defensive system has to be very good. But in terms of game management, those are the big things that sort of give you momentum. Your pack that's moving forward, set pieces that are functioning, giving you opportunities to use the back and opportunities to play off, and then a kicking game which controls the tempo and the momentum. Momentum is a very important thing. I think it's something we don't probably give enough credit to. Why do we kick the ball? I mean, everyone's saying, we just kick the ball away. Do you really think that they sit there in their coaching style? Guys, no, I've actually got a phenomenal idea. I've got a great idea. What if, hear me out, we just give them the ball? Like, how cool is that? We just kick the ball away. I mean, how cool is that? So you obviously will always try and kick to retain, and that's why you want to try and kick to compete. And again, that's sort of it's an accuracy thing. And obviously, if your outside backs are struggling to win that ball back, then you do sometimes fall for possession. But again, it's also about momentum and territory. So even if you, for example, if you kick and you don't retain it, but you make a dominant hit, for example, all of a sudden they're going backwards. Your momentum, whilst you might not have possession, but you're moving forward. and you're putting pressure. And often, what's the first thing a team's going to do when they're going backwards? They're going to kick to you, and they're kicking to you on your terms. So if you box kick, for example, you kick deep, you have a really good chase, you hammer them, you're hitting the rucks, they're under pressure, and they're throwing it back to their flower half, who they're just trying to clear it. They're kicking on your terms. They're not kicking because they're part of their game plan. They're saying, cool, we've got some momentum, we're in a nice position, we want to kick this. They're saying, right, we're on the back foot, we've got to kick and try and reset, get ourselves further up this park. And that's when you can start exploiting defenses. That's kind of the core basics of why we do kick the ball. Obviously, if you then kick and retain the ball, you've gained 20 meters, you've disrupted their defensive line, and that's when you can all of a sudden start exploiting the gaps. So if you can watch a game without freaking out every single time Factor Clerk asks for a blocker, and start to watch why we kick, where we kick, when we kick, and how we kick, you start to understand the game plan around it. And the issue is not always just the game plan. I'm not saying that there aren't times when maybe we shouldn't have kicked where we could have run, but that's kind of the game plan, and it comes down to the execution. If you're kicking well and you're retaining possession, for example, it creates opportunities. If you're not executing well, then it's a problem, and you might sometimes need to change. But that doesn't necessarily mean the game plan is wrong. It means the execution's wrong. Sometimes the game plan is wrong, and I think that we didn't adjust to New Zealand, for example, very well in those 20 minutes. I think that was a game plan issue, as well as obviously the execution thing. We tackled terribly, but it's the execution thing as well. So, yeah, and lots of things can be true at the same time. Sometimes the decision to be kicked can be wrong, and it can be badly executed, and it kind of compounds them. Sometimes the decision to kick can be the wrong decision, but you retain it and it turns out to be the right decision, etc., etc. So there's a lot of fine lines with international rugby. I mean, it's Test rugby. It is the most difficult form of rugby, and it's why it's so enthralling. It's not the URC, it's not top 14 Premiership, and I don't think any sort of competition really can emulate Test rugby, which is so physical and so tactical, and generally is slower than a lot of leagues, for example. And there's very little margin room for error. I think that's the biggest thing. When you play, when you're playing Test rugby at the highest level, you're talking about 15 world-class players on both sides, 30 world-class players in the field. If you're in a URC team, you can be talking about 5 or 6 world-class players in each side, and that's why you can sometimes afford to make mistakes in the URC, but you can't make those mistakes in the Test arena. James says, what do you think of the future at 10 for the box? Any hopes for Masuku, Jordan Hendrickson? Yeah, look, I mean, I think Miley Box 26 years old, so I think that he'll fancy pushing on. I think Andre Parlo's not even that old, as much as he's been around the block. I think he will look at himself and say, if injury free, he's got another World Cup in him. He'll be 33 at the next World Cup, so he's not old at all. But again, the nice thing about it is that we've got Miley Box who can actually push a 100 pilot and say, right, well, obviously, if you're good enough, you'll still continue playing the box, but you got to be good enough. I do think Jordan Hendricks has got Springbok written all over him. I don't see a fault in his game. From a talent point of view, he can distribute, he can tackle, he's got a massive boot. I think a lot of his decision making, and that kind of comes with maturity and learning the style of game and stuff. But from a checkbox of what you want in your 10s, I think he's got it all. I think Masuka's a good player. I think that it'll be interesting to see if he kicks on at Sharks and if he gets a good run. He's 27 years old, I think. I think he's the same age as I am. So he's not old, but not young. So he should be moving into his prime. Yes, he's had a very different career because he's kind of had to come up through the different systems. I think there's a lot of talk about Cade Volater, for example. I'll be interested to see if he can sort of kick on. The hype seems to have died around Chris Smith, who had a great season 2 seasons ago. I think kind of struggled a bit this season. So yeah, I think for me, Hendricks, your current Bosches maybe. Look, everybody keeps talking about Rob de Preer and the fact that he's had such a great season overseas. He's also not that old, but he is 30. So is it a good idea to turn somebody who's 30? I mean, I don't have an issue with age. I think people get far too antsy about players in their late 20s and early 30s. Dwayne Vermeulen's 38 years old. Look at how well he's playing. If Pollard played until he's 37, that's another 2 World Cups. He could play 2027 and 2031. So he could do that. Johnny Sexton's at that age. I think we need to be very careful when we kind of always do this whole, right, well, it's the World Cup, everybody needs to leave, we need the next generation. Well, what is the next generation? Are we talking about getting 22-year-olds in? Or are we talking about getting 25, 26 years old? Everybody says, oh, it's an aging squad. It's a very old squad because players are like 30. 30 is not old. 30 is not old at all. If the average age of the squad was like 34, 35, that's a pretty old squad. But I think a squad who's an average age of 28, for example, 29, is about perfect because you're talking about players who are also in their peaks. I think you peak between about 26 to 34. I think those are sort of maybe sort of 24, if depending on you come. But I think a lot of people take a while to sort of really adjust and get going. Look at Martin Ebok, for example. He's now playing his best rugby of his career. How old is he? 26. It's taken him that time to get there. So it's not necessarily, 24 is not the peak age, I'd say, as a rugby player. I would say about 26, I think, for me, is where you kind of really, I think 24, 25, 26 is when you start really sort of announcing stuff, really start kicking on, and ideally start to sort of settle into international rugby, and then you can play there for 4 or 5 years. Third thing, I think Evan Roos needs a run at 8 on Saturday because he needs to prove himself because he only got 20 minutes against Australia and he did very well against England last year. Look, I don't think Evan Roos is going to the World Cup. So I think he should be coming off the bench this weekend. I think Jasper Wiese needs to start because he will go to the World Cup. Josh said Scott Barrett's in stand at the moment. Yeah, I thought that match on Saturday was one of the best I've ever. I've never seen him play such good rugby. It was a performance for the ages, really, with regards to a lock performance because it was ridiculous. So MC saying Card not going to go over the ball. See. Captain Crunch saying fast decision making has been poor. His decision making on defense, for example, this weekend was sublime. I think a lot of things happened on the Saturday that we didn't plan for, and we struggled to adapt. At the end of the day, we did spend an entire week planning on how we're going to play with Grant Williams, and he lasted 10 seconds. And I think there was always going to be a difference in the way we played with Grant versus the way we played with Faf, the way we were going to play in the first half versus the second half with benches and stuff like that. And not necessarily creating excuses, but if we pretend that Grant Williams 10-second loss didn't have an effect on the game, it certainly did. We didn't even have time to see how it was going to affect the game. We have no idea what the plan was. We have no idea how we were going to play, but I'm pretty sure that there was a lot of things that we were going to do that suddenly we sat there going, oh well, shit, do we still try and do it? Do we not try and do it? How do we change things? Do we change things? So they're definitely going to have a fine effect on the game. Imagine you'd lost Damien Delendi, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in. All of a sudden you're going, right, well, we're going to have to put on Damien Willemse at inside centre probably. Completely different player, completely different style, completely different job. It's going to change the way you play. So MC says, kicking with accuracy is great, otherwise it's going to be a downfall. Contender says we should call in Bosch because of his kicking out. The coach helped him improve the range. Rusty actually used him at 15 versus Wales 2015. Hopes, of course, he can come back to form on the wing. Yeah, we still don't know where Spoo is actually going, which is a bit weird. He must have a deal line. He must have offers on the table, for example. Very interested to see what he decides to do, where he decides to go. A lot of the basic sort of the general acceptance he's going overseas. He's not going to go to the Stormers because they're signing Ben Loader and Sun, and they've still got lots of wings. He's obviously not going to the Sharks. He's left the Bulls. So if he's staying here, Lions look like the only place he would go. Look, he's a Jeppy boy. So maybe Joburg's not the worst place for him. I don't think the Lions have got the acumen to get that kind of deal done, but I'd love to see him there. I don't know if it's a particularly good environment for him. I don't know what the Lions environment is like. You don't get the idea it's a very good environment, but maybe that's something that they're really trying to change. But also maybe sort of taking the spotlight away from him, not going to this sort of a Galacticos team where there's just superstars around every corner. Maybe he'll be a bit less pressure at the Lions. I generally think he'll go overseas. If he does, I don't think the Premiership would really suit. Top 14 is probably where I'd like to see him go. Are they gonna throw out a contract to him? I don't know. I genuinely have no idea what his plan is, but hopefully he finds the right team, and hopefully we do see him getting back to form. We're gonna wrap up there, people. We're gonna be live in 3 hours' time for the team announcement, so we'll have a lot more time to sort of dissect this team a little bit more then when we know exactly what's happening. Now we're just speculating. Next a bit later we'll actually know. And so keep an eye out for this will redirect you to the live stream. So go and turn your notifications on so that you can get notified when we do go live later. And also turn the notification on for the channel so you get a notification when the team's announced and we get our video up there very quickly. But apart from that, keep well, have a good afternoon, and I will see you guys all a bit later.